I didn't go to the party, I wasn't supposed to. I found out about it the way you find out about things you weren't meant to see. Scrolling through my phone at 11 on a Saturday night, half a glass of wine on the counter. The apartment quiet in that particular way it gets when you've been alone long enough to stop noticing. My cousin had tagged my parents in a photo. My aunt was there. My uncle. People I hadn't seen in 2 years were there, laughing at a long table with candles in the middle and a banner in the back that I couldn't fully read but didn't need to. My parents' 30th anniversary. I had known about it for weeks. My mom had mentioned it in passing. We're doing something small, just immediate family. And I had nodded and said that sounded nice and asked if they needed help with anything. She said no. She said they had it handled. I set my phone face down on the counter and finished my wine. I think the part that took the longest to land wasn't the exclusion. It was the phrasing, just immediate family. I had grown up believing I was that. My name is Ivy. I'm 31. I'm a hospital administrator at a mid-sized regional medical center outside Columbus, Ohio. And I have been financially supporting my parents in one way or another since I was 26 years old. It didn't start dramatically. It never does, I think. It started with a phone call my first year out of grad school, my mom's voice doing that thing where she drops at half a register and says honey before they ask. My dad had been laid off. They were 2 months behind on the mortgage. Could I help just this once, just until he found something? I sent $1,500. I told myself it was a loan. He found something 6 months later, a warehouse supervisor position that paid less than his old job. The gap never fully closed. I kept sending money. It became over time just a thing that happened. 200 here, 400 there, then 1,000. Then I was covering their full mortgage payment, $1,800 a month, because the warehouse cut his hours and my mom's part-time job at a dental office didn't come close. I did not have a lot of money. I had a decent salary and no savings and an apartment I kept telling myself I'd upgrade once things settled down. Things did not settle down. My younger sister Paige lived at home until she was 25. My parents paid for her car. They co-signed her apartment when she finally moved out. They flew out to visit her in Phoenix twice the year I turned 28, which was the same year I asked if they could come see me for my birthday and my mom said travel was tight right now. I told myself it was fine. That's the thing about being the responsible one. You get very good at telling yourself things are fine. I should explain something about Paige. She's 4 years younger than me and has always been, in my family's phrasing, the fun one. She's not malicious. I want to be clear about that. She's thoughtless in the way people are thoughtless when no one has ever required them to think. She texts me memes sometimes. She called me on my birthday last year, which she didn't do the year before, so I counted it as progress. Growing up, the dynamic was simple. I was the one who did things correctly, and Paige was the one everyone worried about. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State. Paige changed her major 3 times and needed a 5th year. I graduated and moved into a studio apartment and started paying off my student loans immediately. Paige moved back home and spent 2 years figuring things out. My parents never seemed frustrated with her for this. They seemed, if anything, protective. She was sensitive. She was still finding herself. She needed support. I needed to be strong. I don't think they ever said that to me directly. I just absorbed it somewhere along the way you absorb things in families, through what's praised and what's ignored, through who gets the worried phone calls and who gets asked to be the one worrying. The mortgage situation escalated in my 28th year when my dad refinanced. He called me to let me know, not to ask permission, just to say he'd looked into it and they were able to get a better rate and lower the monthly payment a bit. I said that sounded smart. I asked if it would change the amount I was contributing. He said, probably not much. They were still catching up. But it was a step in the right direction. I found out 14 months later, not from him, not from my mom, but from a letter that came to my apartment. A letter addressed to me, from the bank that held the mortgage. They had refinanced using my name as a co-borrower. I sat with that for a long moment. I reread the letter 3 times. Then I called the bank's customer service line and waited on hold for 22 minutes and spoke to a woman named something I can't remember now, and she confirmed that yes, I was listed as a co-borrower on a refinanced mortgage that had been opened 14 months ago. And did I have questions about the account? I had a lot of questions. I asked the one that felt most urgent. What did this mean for my credit? She walked me through it carefully. The account was in good standing currently. But as a co-borrower, I was equally responsible for the debt. If payments were missed, it would affect my credit the same as theirs. Did I want to discuss options for disputing the co-borrower status? I said I would call back. I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. Not crying, exactly. More like the feeling you get when something confirms a thing you'd been afraid to think clearly. I called my dad that night. He answered on the third ring, cheerful, asking how I was. I told him I'd received a letter from the bank. There was a pause, a short one, but I noticed it. He said the broker had mentioned they might need a co-borrower to qualify for the rate, and he'd thought it would be fine since I was already helping with payments anyway, so it was sort of like I was already involved, and he hadn't wanted to make a big deal out of it. I asked him when he had planned to tell me. He said he figured I'd get something in the mail eventually. I didn't say what I wanted to say. I said I needed to think about things and I'd call him back. He said okay and told me not to overthink it and that I should come visit soon. My mom had made my favorite soup last week and had saved some in the freezer. I hung up and sat in the silence for a long time. 2 weeks after that, I sent them a gift for their anniversary, a weekend stay at a bed and breakfast, about 2 hours from their house, the kind of place with a clawfoot tub and a fireplace and breakfast included. I'd been saving the hotel points for almost a year. I packaged it in a card that said I was proud of 30 years, and I loved them and I hoped they enjoyed it. It arrived on a Tuesday. On Friday, I got it back in the mail. The envelope had been opened and resealed with tape. Inside was the gift card, unused, and a note in my mom's handwriting that said the timing didn't work with the anniversary plans, and she didn't want it to go to waste, so she was returning it. She didn't mention the plans she had instead. She didn't say what the timing conflicted with. She signed it Love, Mom, and drew a small heart. That was the Friday before the Saturday I saw the photos. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there and did the math I had been avoiding doing for years. The real math, not the hopeful version. I pulled up my bank statements on my phone. I had sent my parents, in various forms, somewhere in the range of $62,000 over 5 years. I had $2,000 and change in savings. My retirement contributions were minimal because I'd kept telling myself I'd increase them once things stabilized. $62,000. I thought about the week I'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for lunch because I'd overextended on a payment and didn't want to overdraft before my next paycheck. I thought about the trip to Portland I hadn't taken because I couldn't justify the cost. I thought about the way I felt when my friend had asked why I never seemed to have money for things, and I'd said I was just being careful, building savings. You know how it is. I thought about my name on a mortgage I had not agreed to sign. I got up around 4 in the morning and made coffee and opened my laptop and spent 2 hours reading about co-borrower removal, mortgage fraud, and the difference between civil and criminal liability for forging someone's signature on a financial document. I did not feel angry yet. I felt very, very clear. On Monday morning, I called a real estate attorney I found through my hospital's employee assistance program. I explained the situation. I told her about the letter, the refinancing, the fact that I had never been told, never signed anything, never consented. She asked if I was certain I hadn't signed anything. Sometimes people sign closing documents without fully reading them. I told her I had not attended any closing. I had not signed anything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said this was potentially serious, that signing someone else's name on a mortgage without their knowledge or consent was fraud, that I had options, including filing a report with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, disputing the co-borrower status with the lender, or pursuing civil remedies, or, depending on the evidence, referring the matter to the district attorney's office. I told her I wanted to start with the bank. I wanted to document everything before I decided on next steps. She said that was smart. She said to get everything in writing. I did not call my parents that week. I did not return my dad's text asking if I was coming for Thanksgiving this year because he was hoping to do a big thing. I did not respond to my mom's voicemail saying she'd found a sweater she thought I'd like at TJ Maxx, and did I want her to hold it. I contacted the bank. I submitted a formal dispute of the co-borrower designation, explaining that I had not consented to or signed any documents related to the refinancing. The bank opened an investigation. They were not warm about it, but they were procedurally thorough, which was all I needed. I documented everything. The letter, the dates, the phone call with my dad. I wrote it all down while it was fresh, in a document I saved in 3 places, and I stopped sending money. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send a message. The first of the month came and I didn't transfer $1,800 to their account. I paid my own bills. I put $300 into my savings account instead. I sat with the strange lightness of it. My mom called on the 4th. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was just checking in. Things were a little tight this month. She didn't want to bother me, but she was wondering if I was able to help with the mortgage payment. My dad called on the 6th. I let that go too. His voicemail was shorter. He said, "Call me back when you get a chance." On the 9th, my aunt called. My mom's older sister, who lives in Cincinnati, who I have a cordial but not close relationship with. She said my mom had mentioned I was going through something and she just wanted to check on me. She said family was important, and she hoped whatever was going on, I'd remember that. She said my mom was upset. I thanked her for calling. I said I was doing well. I said I had a work call in 5 minutes. My cousin, the one who had posted the anniversary photos, sent me a message on Instagram. It said, "Hey, hope you're okay. Your mom said you've been distant and she's worried." I read it and put my phone down. That was the first time I felt something that might have been anger, or might just have been exhaustion finally arriving at its name. A family group chat I had been added to against my will, the kind with too many people and inexplicable gifts, suddenly became active. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were posting things about family sticking together, and hard times happen to everyone. Nobody mentioned specifics. Nobody said my name, but the timing was not subtle. I left the group chat. I did it quietly, the way I did most things. I closed the app and went back to work. My sister called that weekend. Paige. She did not ask if I was okay. She said Mon is really stressed, and I don't know what's going on between you two. But can you just talk to her, because this is affecting everyone and I really need everyone to get along right now, because I'm dealing with my own stuff. I asked what her own stuff was. She said she and her boyfriend were having some issues and she just needed things at home to be stable. I told her I understood that was hard. I told her I hoped things got better with her boyfriend. I told her I was going to get off the phone because I was tired. She said I was being selfish. I said I'd talk to her later, and I hung up. The bank completed their investigation 11 weeks after I filed the dispute. They concluded that there was no record of my signature on the refinancing documents. What had been submitted appeared to be a typed authorization that did not meet their standard co-borrower verification requirements. They removed my name from the account. They also flagged the file for review by their fraud division. They sent me a letter explaining this. They told me I might be contacted by their team or by law enforcement if the matter was referred further. I forwarded the letter to my attorney. She said this was actually a better outcome for me than I had anticipated. My credit was protected. The formal removal was documented. And the fraud flag meant the situation was now on record, regardless of what I chose to do next. I chose not to pursue criminal charges. I want to be honest about why, not because I didn't think it was warranted, and not because what they did was okay. It was because I had spent 5 years being responsible for my parents' consequences, and I was finished doing that. Filing charges would have meant more time, more calls, more of my energy directed at them. I was tired of spending my energy on them. I sent a single text to my dad. It said, "The bank has removed me as co-borrower. I have documentation of the full situation. I won't be sending money going forward. I wish you both well." He called 4 times in the following hour. I watched the phone light up from across the room. My mom sent a text that said, "Ivy, please call us. This is a misunderstanding, please." I read it. I set my phone face down. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a real estate agent. She was calling because she had a listing inquiry about my parents' address, and my name had shown up on a previous document in the property record. And she wanted to confirm I wasn't a current stakeholder before proceeding. I told her I had been removed as co-borrower. I told her I had no interest in the property. She thanked me and we hung up. I stared at my ceiling for a moment. Then I understood. They were trying to sell the house. They couldn't. I found this out not because anyone told me, but because the same real estate agent called back 2 weeks later asking a follow-up question about the dispute filing, which was apparently visible in the property record, and whether it had been fully resolved. I confirmed it had. She thanked me again. From what I was able to piece together later, from a conversation I had with my aunt months afterward, when she called in a different tone, quieter, without the lecture. My parents had fallen 3 months behind on the mortgage by the time they tried to list. The lender had already initiated default proceedings. The sale process stalled because of the title complications, and ultimately the bank moved forward with foreclosure. My parents moved in with my aunt by the end of the year. My aunt, to her credit, did not ask me to contribute. I want to say something about the months that followed, because I think this is the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't been in something like this. I didn't feel triumphant. I know that's what you're maybe expecting. Some moment of vindication, watching the consequences arrive. I didn't feel that. What I felt, mostly, was quiet. An unfamiliar kind of quiet. The kind that comes when you stop bracing. I put $1,200 into savings that first month, then $1,500 the next. I bought a couch I had been putting off for 4 years. I booked a flight to see a friend in Denver who I hadn't visited because I could never justify the cost. I sat on her back porch and drank coffee, and she said, "You seem different," and I said, "I think I might be." I increased my 401k contribution for the first time since I started my job. I am not going to pretend the grief wasn't there too. It was. It lived in the spaces between the relief, in the moments when I saw someone else's family photos on social media and felt the old familiar ache of wondering what it would have been like to be in a different kind of family. The kind where you're not the one holding everything together. The kind where you're invited to the party. I mourned the version of my parents I had spent a long time trying to deserve. I think that version had never really existed, or maybe it had existed and was gone before I was old enough to remember. Either way, I let myself be sad about it. Not forever. Just enough. My sister called me 7 months later. Not with a request. Just to talk. It was a strange conversation. Halting, a little awkward. Both of us circling something neither of us named directly. She said things had been hard. She said she was starting to understand some things she hadn't before. She didn't apologize. I didn't ask her to. We talked for 40 minutes, mostly about nothing, and when we hung up I sat with the feeling of it and thought maybe someday that could become something. I didn't call my parents. I thought about it sometimes, late at night, the way you think about things that are finished, not with longing exactly, more with a kind of distant recognition. We had been in a transaction for a long time and I had confused it for a relationship. That wasn't entirely their fault, and it wasn't entirely mine. It was just what it was. I sent my mom a card on her birthday. I wrote a few sentences. I said I hoped she was doing okay. I meant it. She didn't respond. That was okay. There's a line I keep coming back to that a friend said to me during all of this, one of those things that sound simple until you've lived it. She said, "Just because someone needs you doesn't mean they love you." I'd heard variations of that before. It had never landed, but that night, sitting on my kitchen floor with a bank letter in my hand and $62,000 of math in my head, it landed. The people who love you show up. Not just when the money runs out. Not just when they want something softened or managed or handled. They show up for the ordinary things, the birthday, the bad week, the moment you just need someone to be there. My parents needed me for a long time. I kept showing up thinking need and love were the same thing. It took a letter from a bank to teach me they weren't. I'm not angry about it anymore. I was, for a while. The real kind of anger, not the kind that burns clean, but the kind that sits in your chest and makes you tired. That anger faded eventually, the way things do when you stop feeding them. What's left is something that feels more like clarity than anything else, an understanding of what I will do and what I won't do and why, and for whom. I work hard. I save money now. I have 3 months of emergency fund for the first time in my adult life. I take care of myself the way I was always taking care of other people. And I'm learning that it doesn't feel selfish. It feels like arriving somewhere I was always supposed to be. I came home from Denver and walked into my apartment and looked around at the couch and the quiet and the life that was mine. And I thought, this is what it feels like to choose yourself. I sat down. I breathed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I've thought a lot about what made this whole thing possible in the first place. Not what my parents did, but what I did for years that allowed it to continue. I was not naive. I knew on some level that the arrangement wasn't balanced. I knew my sister wasn't contributing. I knew my parents weren't going to suddenly become people who asked how I was doing before they asked if I could cover the payment this month. I knew all of that, and I kept sending the money anyway because I had convinced myself that being needed was close enough to being loved. That's the thing nobody tells you about being the responsible one in a family. You get rewarded for it, quietly, in ways that feel like love but aren't quite. You get called the dependable one, the one we can always count on. And it feels good, for a while, to be counted on. It feels like a role that matters. What you don't see until much later is that the role was never about you. It was about what you could provide. The moment you stop providing, you find out exactly how much of the relationship was built on that. I found out when my gift came back in the mail. I found out when I saw the photo. I found out, most clearly, when I read the bank letter and understood that my parents had put my name on a legal document without asking me, because they assumed I was a resource they could draw from without checking first. That's not a mistake. That's a map. It tells you exactly how someone sees you. I don't think my parents are evil people. I've spent real time sitting with that, making sure I'm being honest rather than generous. I think they are people who made choices, consistently, over many years, and then found reasons to not examine those choices. I think my dad told himself it was practical, that I was already involved anyway, that I wouldn't mind. I think my mom told herself that returning the gift was somehow kinder than a conversation. I think Paige told herself that calling me selfish was the same thing as being right. People can believe a lot of things when the alternative is accountability. What I had to figure out, and this took longer than I'd like to admit, was that understanding why people do things doesn't mean you have to keep absorbing the consequences of those things. Clarity and forgiveness are not the same as access. You can understand someone completely and still decide they don't get to be close to you anymore. That's not coldness, that's intelligence applied to your own life. The $62,000 is gone. I made peace with that, not because it didn't matter, but because spending my remaining energy grieving it would cost me even more. What I chose to do instead was use the clarity it bought me. That money taught me finally and completely the difference between people who love you and people who need you. That's worth something, even if the tuition was brutal. I think about Ivy sometimes. I think about the version of me at 26, wiring that first $1,500, telling herself it was temporary. It was just this once. It was what you do for family. I wish I could tell her something useful. I'm not sure she would have listened. Some things you have to arrive at on your own schedule. What I know now is that choosing yourself is not the same as abandoning people. It's just refusing to be abandoned slowly, piece by piece, in a direction that only moves one way. I stopped moving in that direction. I turned around, and the life that was waiting when I did, the savings, the couch, the flight to Denver, the quiet, was more than I'd let myself imagine for a long time. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's mine.